Good evening and welcome to Help Is Here, a virtual conference series providing information and resources to families and caregivers about youth substance use. This series is brought to you by the Connecticut Department of Children and Families in partnership with the Connecticut Women's Consortium through federal funding support from SAMHSA and CSAT. I am now pleased to introduce you to today's speakers, William McClendon and Kenneth Cayones. Kenneth has been a family peer specialist for Beacon Health Options for 5 years. He has covered every region over his time and currently is assigned to regions 4 and 6. He came into this position with 15 years working experience in the behavioral health field from direct care in group homes and day programs. Kenneth was also a foster parent with Wheeler Clinic for 4 years. He is one of the tri-chairs for Consumer and Family Advisory Council, CFAC, and is heavily involved with the ICANN conference. At this time, he is continuing his education and pursuing a bachelor's in accounting. William McClendon has defied the odds stacked against him. Growing up in DCF's care due to neglect, abuse, and abandonment, Will's story gives hope to anyone who experienced similar adversities. From being expelled in the 5th grade to being confined from 14 to 18 years old, no one expected him to become the man he is today except a guidance counselor that he met at the age of 13. With her support, reassurance, and guidance, Will was able to obtain his master's degree, self-publish an autobiography, and become a member of the 100 Men of Color in 2017. Now he provides therapeutic mentoring services to young people in the same community he once terrorized. I want to thank both Kenneth and Will for being with us tonight, and we look forward to your presentation.
A little bit about myself again, like the biography said, I've been working with a number of youths, and I think from my perspective is, I think one of the main things is getting youths to trust you and getting them to commit to treatment. I think that's one of the main things in getting them to get to the treatment and follow through in treatment. Connecticut is lucky to have a variety of ways of outpatient treatments to get young adults to get treatment, maybe in the home. In being a peer specialist and working directly with families and trying to get them the help that they need in navigating the system. I mean, me as a peer itself, it's hard to find some of the services out there and helping the families who don't know what they're looking for in finding treatment is understandable in dealing with the frustrations. But I mean, trying to help a family understand on how to get it and how to understand a kid that they don't even want to believe that this individual has this problem in following through with a treatment. It's hard, it's difficult. I mean, having a teenager myself, it's hard to do that and following through with them to say, well, I believe in being straightforward and direct. And I think a lot of kids like that, and I think that is how we make that connection. I make that connection as a family peer in dealing with the young adults and families and saying, this is what it is. And you have to see that it is a problem that you're having and not being able to function without having this particular drug, alcohol, weed, whatever the substance might be.
I couldn't agree more, especially on building relationships. I think that's key with our children and anyone that we work with. Young people do not share things with people they don't trust. And if you don't have a solid relationship with a young person, then you might not even know some of the things that may be going on, some of the feelings, some of the emotions, some of the vices that they might be dealing with or doing. So building a relationship is very key and crucial to us helping them throughout their journey. Without that relationship built, there's not going to be much work done. There's not going to be much conversations to be had to really get down to the deep rooted stuff that triggers and that young people go through. So I definitely appreciate that part, Ken, of you acknowledging building a relationship and how vital that is to helping young people, especially with substance abuse or alcoholic. Um, and that helps with leading into my story. I started with alcohol and drugs at a very young age. When I was about 9 years old, I smoked weed for the first time. And that stemmed from me being suspended from school, not having much support at home, not having any, good clothing. So when I went to school, kids would laugh at me and I didn't know how to handle that. And so what I did was I turned that into me acting out and being a class clown. And so I started acting out in school, which led to suspension. And when I got suspended, every time I would go home and my mom would beat me, and then I was free to do whatever I want for those 3 to 5 days during my suspension. And one day during the suspension, I went outside to hang out with some of the older kids who had dropped out of school, and they were smoking weed and, just hanging out. And so I joined them, and, I smoked for the first time with them. And I started to like the feeling, even at a fragile 9 years old. I appreciated the feeling. And so, I started to get suspended more often, a lot. So, I wasn't being picked on or bullied in school because of my clothing, but also to hang out with some of those same kids who was, getting high. And, I wanted to be a part of that community. I wanted to be a part of that culture. So I became very dependent on marijuana at a very young age, starting from 9 and then progressing until 10, 11. And all throughout these years that my life progressed, my situation still ain't changed. We were still poor. I was still getting suspended. I was still getting in trouble. So this became a very needed coping mechanism for me to just be able to deal with, some of my realities, that I was going through. And, that led to more problems of, when you get high at a young age and your brain's not fully developed until past 25 as it is. But when you're so young and you're smoking, you're going to make real irrational, bad decisions, So that was kind of my lifestyle of making really bad, poor decisions within the community, within my household. And, that was my childhood or my adolescence of a lot of poor choices, a lot from being under the influence of marijuana. And so when I was about 12 years old, I was still, smoking, and I got into trouble with the law for the first time, because I was, high, and I, beat a kid up and stole his bike. And, I started to go to detention centers and be on probation. And all this time, my probation officer told me that I couldn't smoke weed. If I smoke weed, it'd be a violation of probation. But then I'll talk to some of the older guys in the community, and they'll say if you drink vinegar or they had some other tricks to still be able to smoke weed and pass your urine test. And, me being naive, I started doing the same thing. So that's just how much, marijuana had a stranglehold on me, where, even I'm risking my freedom just to, get high at a very young age. And, I continued to smoke, but to drink vinegar before I see my probation officer. And, I did that for the whole 12 months that I was on probation. And, I got away with it, but then I ended up going to detention a few months after I got off probation. A lot because I was truant from school. I had gone through shelters. I had gone through a lot of different organizations, being with DCF, being neglected, being abused throughout in the household through this time, that I was just dealing with a lot of things at once. And I would like to say that that was the reason why I smoked, but I don't believe it was fully. At this point in my life, I started to like how you felt when you were high at a young age, and you was giggly, and you get munchies, and you want to eat junk food and snacks, and I kind of like the feeling of it. So it went from me just smoking to smoke with the older kids to me kind of smoking all the time, and being very dependent on getting high, and smoking with my friends or my families. And my mom and my dad, they were very unsupportive with this, because I smoked weed with my mom and I smoked weed with my dad as young as 12 years old. I was smoking weed with my parents, so that wasn't good influencing, that wasn't good parenting. But this is the reality of a lot of our young people, where their parents allow these behaviors. So us as providers, how can you intervene? How can you help? How can you tell them, how unhealthy it is when, their parents are telling them it's okay, and doing it with them? So that was my strange reality. And, so my life continued to kind of fall apart. Luckily around this age, I had met a school social worker. I had got expelled in about the fifth grade, and I went to a transition school. And during this transition school, I met a guidance counselor by the name of Miss Stacy Epps, and she kind of became a support, definitely a positive parent adult in my life, that throughout these hardships and these times, she was able to guide me. She was able to give me good direction. Although I wasn't listening at that time, she was definitely planting seeds that was able to grow later. But I appreciate the fact that she took the time to plant those seeds, because I wasn't listening at that age. I wasn't fully understanding at that age. I'm pretty sure she felt sometimes it seemed like it was going in one ear and out the other. But I definitely admired this lady. I definitely respected her. So I treated her and I gravitated to her much more than I did to any other adult. I really didn't trust adults at this part of my life, a lot due to a lot of trauma that I had experienced with adults. So it was really hard for me to trust anyone, but especially an adult. But this one particular lady, I wholeheartedly respected. And, we started to blossom a relationship. So that really helped me throughout my downtimes as a teenager, especially when my mom abandoned my sisters and I, and ended up, really heavily involved in DCF and the ward of the state. At the time, I was in detention as well, so I was duly committed. And, I really didn't have anyone at this time. But this lady, Miss Epps, she kind of was there for me. She, came to visit me when, I was in residential programs or Long Lane or, detention center. And, she really continued to try to help me blossom into, a young man. And so for about 3 years, from when I was about 14 to 17, she was really there while I was, in and out of different detention centers or residential programs, until I went to a boot camp when I was about 17 in Pennsylvania. And I went to this boot camp in Pennsylvania, and Miss Epps, she visited me in Pennsylvania all the way from Connecticut. But I also found some more things at this boot camp. I found structure, I found respect, I found guidance, and I found myself as well. And so I was in the boot camp for about 18 months. And for the first time in my life, I positively kind of completed a program, and it felt really good. I got my GED, then I got my high school diploma, then I got accepted to some colleges, and things were looking good for me. And so when I was 18, I left the boot camp and I went off to college in Massachusetts. But that's when I started to get more heavily involved with drugs. A lot marijuana. I really did not want to explore or experiment with other drugs a lot because of my father being on heavy drugs, and I always was scared of addiction. So I didn't try any other hard drugs. But when I went to college, um, you know, marijuana really consumed me. I spent more time smoking than I did in class. And it was like that for me and maybe 7 other freshmen that I met my first year. And fortunately for me, I was kind of strong enough and I had a lot of willpower that I was able to smoke weed and complete my schoolwork at a high level that I didn't flunk out, but a lot of other of my friends, they did, and there were only about 2 or 3 of us out of 8 stayed after the first semester, and only 2 of us were still there after the first year. A lot because all we really did was smoke weed throughout the night, drink alcohol throughout the night, and a lot of them didn't really go to class. I made it to class, but sometimes I'll leave class to smoke weed, or I'll be smoking before I go to class and go to class 20 minutes late. And that was kind of like my everyday thing. And so I became very much consumed more with substance, and I was definitely abusing substance. And I did that for, pretty much my whole time in college. So for about 4.5 years, I abused drugs, kind of hardcore. I abused marijuana hardcore. And, I would tell my teachers or my professors my life story, and they'll feel sad, so they'll give me a little leverage. They'll give me a little benefit of the doubt. And I manipulated them a lot, by telling them my story so that when I went to class late or if I was high, they kind of, didn't penalize me as much as they maybe would have penalized other people. And so I was very heavily involved in, substance abuse and then manipulating my way to make it seem like it's okay. And this whole time, Miss Epps, it was still part of my life. And, I kind of hid the fact that I was smoking weed. She didn't even know that I was smoking weed as much as I was doing. And sometimes I would, if it come up, I would tell that I'm not smoking weed, because I was kind of ashamed, and I know how much, she cared for me and how much she wanted the best of me, and I didn't want to disappoint her, so I hid a lot of these things, and I didn't tell her, that I was smoking, all night, or I was smoking so much, or that I was even smoking at all. And so that became, that became my reality, for my whole high school years, my whole college years, excuse me. And then I got into a little trouble in college. I got kicked out of college my last semester, and that kind of put me in a place where, marijuana then kind of became my coping mechanism to deal with the disappointment that I felt, especially being so close to achieving something in my life, and then I felt like I'm back at square one. So I heavily abused more, marijuana, and at a higher level, at this time, especially with not going to school. I wasn't working, so that was pretty much all I was doing. And so, I ended up having a daughter about a year after I got kicked out of college. And she really saved me and she really helped me, because I never wanted to be like my parents was. I always wanted to be a better parent than my parents was. And so I really vowed to be a good role model. And I didn't want her to see me smoking weed. I didn't want her to smell it. I didn't want her to even know what it is. So I stopped smoking weed, for a little bit, but then I wasn't able to fully stop. So I just didn't do it around her, or I just didn't have it in her presence. But all this while I'm in Mass, and although I'm from Hartford, I was in Mass, went to school in Mass. Me and her mom, started having trouble. And so I came back to Hartford. And when I came back to Hartford, of course, all my family, they're heavily involved in, marijuana. And so I started to, smoke more often. And I started to do it more often and, with my family members. And, and it seemed as I was going to be stuck, kind of in this lifestyle of, smoking. And, one night in particular, it was about 2:30 to 3 a.m. And I'm going to the corner store, because in certain corner stores, they used to sell marijuana. And so I'm going to the store to get some marijuana. And, I had a large wad of cash on me, and I pulled out my money, and some guys saw me pull out my money. And so I walked after the store. There was they called it like a bootleg truck, where after hours you can go buy alcohol. And so I walked down, to the actually I drove down. It's just up the block to the little bootleg truck, and try to purchase some alcohol. And the same guy that saw me in the store, he followed me to the bootleg truck, and he kind of pulled me to the side. Hey, come here, let me talk to you. I got some weed for you. I said, no, it's okay. I already have some weed. He said, no, I got some good weed. Come here. And so he was kind of bugging me. So I went over like, okay, what's up, bro? What do you want? And then once I said that, he, pulled out a knife and he told me to give me your money. And I, another thing about me was I was always too prideful. And I always thought that would be my downfall. And so I told him, no, get out of here. I'm not giving you anything. And so I went to go walk away. And as I did that, I kind of stuck my money in between my under pants and my pants. And so as I started walking away, some of the money started to fall out. And so he was picking up some of the money. And so I tackled him, and we got into a scuffle. And I remember being on top of him. He's being on his back. And then some of his, two of his friends then attacked me. And, that lasted for maybe about 30 seconds to a minute of, me being attacked. Now I'm on my back, and I'm, kind of balled up so I don't get hit. And then they run off. And as they ran off, I'm thinking, I'm gonna run them over with my car. But when I got out my car to go to the after hour alcohol place, I left my keys running in the ignition, and so they had took my car as well. And so I just stood in the middle of the street, and I put my hands on my hips as I said, "You got to be kidding me!" And as I put my hands on my hips, I felt something like wet, dripping, sticky. And so I looked at my hands, and my hands was covered in blood. And I didn't notice I was being like stabbed. I thought I was being kicked or punched, but I was actually being stabbed by his buddies and him. And so, at this point, all I could think about was my daughter and how I'm never going to see her again because I'm going to die, and, all this sad stuff. And even thinking that way, I still had too much pride to call the police to get some help for myself, or call an ambulance to get some help for myself. So I just laid in the middle of the street, and I just hoped that someone would stop, see me, and, call for me. And that's what I did. I just laid in the middle of the street, and luckily, two girls drove by, and they got out of their car, and they assisted me, they aided me, they called for ambulance. And I just remember passing out and waking up in the hospital. And when I woke up in the hospital, the same guardian angel, Miss Epps, Stacey Epps, she was there. And she was, she always told me throughout my life that I was blessed. I always thought that I was lucky because I would, certain things would just happen for me, or, I'll overcome things. And I always just thought that it was luck, but she always said that I was blessed. And at this time, I started to believe that I was blessed, because here I am still alive, And so, you know, I lost a lot of blood, almost about 2 pints of blood. Both of my lungs collapsed. And, you know, the last thing on my mind was, you know, smoking weed or smoking again. So that, although that situation seemed very disturbing and sad, it actually kind of saved my life in a lot of ways, because I vowed to, you know, to not smoke, to not put myself in those predicaments where I can be that vulnerable and where I won't be able to see my daughter or talk to my daughter again. And I also found God, and I was able to kind of start to do the right thing, or at least want to do the right thing. And, you know, if anyone was ever a born again Christian, you know, if you ever try to do the right thing, and then the first time, you know, you backslide or you go back to your old ways, you know, just to test you, just to see how strong you are, just to see how committed you are. And so, you know, after I went into church and, you know, I vowed to be better, and about 6 months to a year, I found myself back in the position where I was hanging out with some of my friends or smoking. But I quickly snapped out of that as well and realized that that's not what I wanted. You know, I wanted more for myself. I wanted more for my daughter. I wanted more for my future. And so I started to live better, and I started to be better. I went back to school, and I got my master's degree in education. And I always wanted to write a book. And so I started to write my book, you know, during this time. And I just thought that it would take forever to write a book. But once I started to be dedicated, you know, I ended up writing the book in about 30 days, you know, writing the book. And so in about 2 months, I had completed my autobiography. And, you know, I felt really good and I felt accomplished about myself. And then I started to work in the community with some of the same people who kind of shared, you know, my similar past of, you know, being abusing substance, you know, being truant, being defiant, maybe incarcerated. And so I found the passion of working with these young people and helping them and sharing my experiences in my life in order to help other people, in order to, you know, change other people's trajectories, as my trajectory was changed by Miss Stacey Epps. And for the past 8 years, 7.5, 8 years, you know, that kind of been my walk with working within the community to help people and to, you know, try to change the narrative of, you know, a lot of our young people, and, you know, trying to help the community, which I live in and I grew up in. And I'm just blessed and honored to be able to still be here, although, you know, all these hardships that I spoke of, I'm just glad that I can even speak on them today and speak on them from a place where they have shaped me and made me a better person. And so, you know, that's kind of my story, and how substance has played a huge part in my life, but how, as today, I try to, you know, be that change and help other people who's dealing with it, going through it.
And I myself, I met Will as one of the providers that I have connected families with in regards to services. It's just about 7 o'clock. We have about 15 more minutes. We could open up the floor to questions. Shannon?
I am here. We would definitely like to open this up for questions and conversation. And so if folks want to go ahead and type those into the chat box, I'm happy to read them for you.
I want to say you two young men are a true fine example. Awesome. We need people like you. We need young people like you to express your story, your views, because you truly are the leaders. You truly are the leaders. And I just want to say, I'm glad I tuned in tonight. It got me, I see hope back in society. You know, I see two fine young people that are taking the lead, and I just wish that you guys keep up the good work.